Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency. The final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome back into another edition of the 2024 Team Autopsy Report. We got the SMU Mustangs on the autopsy table. Folks, I got you for the next 25 minutes, so I'm not going to waste any time in getting to this report. As we always like to do, let's start with the handicapping analysis for the Mustangs. Under the leadership of Rhett Lashley, this head coach, in 3 years as the head coach there of the Mustangs, a winning percentage of 700, going 29 wins and 12 losses thus far. All right. This team finished 11-1 in the regular season. Now, when I look at the betting expectations for this team, when you look at their season win totals, looking back at last June, season win total of 7.5, so easily exceeded that number. Now, when we look at our three metrics that make up our composite win total, we had this team at a win total of 8.8. Even with that number, they still exceeded that with their regular season total wins. So great job there by that team. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the numbers here. When we look at a team's strength of schedule, for the most part, you can control who you play in the non-conference. Your in-conference is strictly by chance. And this team had a strength of schedule of 0.364. When you think about it, 134 Division I teams playing college football last year, their schedule would have ranked 62nd out of that. when you look at your strength of record, now this is something that you can't control. It's how does your opponents do week in and week out as far as them winning their games or losing. SMU's opponents went 5.511. So out of 134 teams, that would have ranked 81st. So their opponents, while strength of record wise was a little bit better, their strength of record, their opponent's winning percentage, not so difficult. So let's start with the offensive side of the ball as we start to dig into some of these numbers here. And for a baseline, we like to use the number 68. And the reason we use 68 is because that's how many Power One teams there are. When you combine the total amount of teams in the ACC, Southeastern Conference, Big 12, and the Big 10, and include Notre Dame, that's where we get that 68 from. So what I want to look at is how many of your opponents had that power ranking inside of that top 68. And if you're watching on YouTube or our Twitter feed at Crunchtime VIP, want to say thank you. If you're listening on the podcast, don't worry, I got you covered. I'm going to go through these data points real quickly. Let me go over the opponents' records for SMU. Nevada was 3-10. We don't include Houston Christian because they're not a Division I team. BYU was 10-2. TCU 8-4, Florida State 2-10, Louisville 8-4, Stanford 3-9, Duke 9-3, Pitt 7-5, had their second bye week and then finished up the last 3 games of the regular season with Boston College 7-5, Virginia 5-7, and the Cal Golden Bears at 6-6. So when you really look at their record, their opponents were either really good, 8+ wins, or they weren't so good, 500 or less. So had a mixed composite, and that's why you see their strength of record not reflecting how challenging or daunting their schedule was. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at how many of their opponents finished ranked from a defensive standpoint inside of that top 68. So how good were the defenses that this SMU offense went up against? 9 of their opponents had a defense that was inside of the top 68. Only Nevada, Stanford, and of course, Houston Christian was outside of that top 68. So they faced some really solid defenses week in and week out. Now, let's get into taking a look at their overall data points here. And I'm going to give you what their accounting numbers are. And basically, if you're looking at any website, if you take out the bowl games and playoff games, if you just look at their regular season numbers, these are the raw accounting numbers that I'm going to give you. And then we're going to look at are adjusted for those particular metrics, whether it's points per game, passing, rushing, total offense. We really get a much better indicator of how these teams performed. So NCAA scoring average, basically about 28 points per game. The Mustangs were at 38.5. When we adjust for opponents, just a tick below that at 36.4. So no big major swings there. As far as their passing offense goes, NCAA average about 227 yards per game. SMU was at 267. When we adjust for opponent, actually goes up about 6 yards to 273. So about a 6-yard improvement there. And as far as rushing yardage goes, average team ran for about 160 yards last year. The Mustangs, whether we look at their accounting stats or adjusted, they were about 177. So about 20 plus, let's call it 16 yards better than the NCAA average there. Total offense, average team was about 387 yards per game. SMU, 443. When we adjust for opponent, it goes up to 451. So about an 8-yard improvement there. Now, when we get into some of our advanced numbers here, and some of the things that we want to look at are your drives ending with a score, whether it's a touchdown or field goal, the percent of your total drives ending with a touchdown, and then your adjusted third down conversion percentage. All three very key metrics that we look at here. So average team last year, they're scoring drives, about 40% of their drives ended with either a touchdown or field goal. SMU was at 53%. The average team drives ending with a touchdown, about 29%. SMU was at 38%. So a little over one out of every three of their drives were ending with a touchdown. That's very effective and efficient offense there. And as far as third down conversion rate, average team was about 39%. SMU was at 45%. So this offense was very dynamic when it needed to be. Team did a really good job of protecting a mobile quarterback, because the average team had about 24 sacks during the regular season. SMU only gave up 18 of those. So good job there. Need to do a little bit better job of taking care of the ball. They did commit 19 turnovers when we removed that Houston Christian outcome. So let's get into our 3 E's. How effective, how explosive, and how efficient was your offense last year? And when we look at the Mustangs last year, they were the 40th most effective offense last year. As far as being explosive, 21st. And as far as efficiency, they were 18th. Overall, the SMU Mustangs were our 28th best offense in college football last year. When you're talking about 134 teams, that is really impressive offense there. Now, let's take a look at the defense here. How good were the offenses that SMU's defense went up against last year? Again, using that barometer of 68, how many of those opponents' offense were inside of that 68 number? Well, BYU was 41st. TCU was 17th. Louisville was 18th. Duke was 59th. Pitt 64th. Boston College was 54th. So 6 of their opponents had offenses inside of that top 68. So the quality of offenses that this SMU team went up against week in and week out, on an average, if you just kind of average out all of their opponents there, you're talking about a team that faced on average about a bottom tier power 4 offense week in and week out. So defense wasn't always challenged the way that their offense may have been last year. So now let's take a look at the defensive metrics here. Remember, average defense last year gave up about 26 points per game. SMU gave up a tick over 20 points per game, whether it's using their raw accounting numbers or our adjusted numbers. Passing, 218 yards per game passing was the average. SMU gave up about 233 yards per game. That's their accounting numbers. When we look at our adjusted numbers, more closer to the average, 217 yards per game. So about a 16-yard improvement there based on their competition. As far as the rushing numbers go, average team gave up about 152 yards per game rushing. On the surface, SMU gave up 93 yards per game, but when we adjust for opponent, that takes a significant jump up to 129 yards per game rushing. Still well below the NCAA average, but you're talking about a 36 yard per game difference between what the data shows that they gave up and then when we start adjusting for opponents, that they gave up. So that's something that we always like to keep in mind. And then total offense per game allowed 371 yards per game. When we look at SMU, 326 yards per game. But when we adjust for opponent, once again, that number goes up to 346 yards per game. So a negative of about 20 more yards per game is what this offense would have given up based on the adjusted schedule. Once again, let's go back to drives ending with a score, drives ending with a touchdown, and third down conversion. SMU's opponents were ending their drives with a touchdown or field goal about 27% of the time. As far as their opponents finding the end zone, 21% of the time, and they did a fantastic job of getting off the field on third downs, only allowing their opponents to convert. When we adjusted, 32%. That is winning football there. And this team did a great job of getting after the opponent's quarterbacks. 40 sacks in the regular season last year. Remember, I said the average was about 24 for the regular season. They absolutely surpassed that number. Their opponents converting on fourth down, 17 out of 40. So their opponents were only converting about 42.5%, well below the average there. And they did force 21 turnovers. So this defense absolutely did a bang-up job there. And now when we look at our 3 E's on the defensive side of the ball, how effective was your defense? How explosive was your defense in not allowing the big plays, whether it's in the run game or the pass game, and how efficient was your defense? SMU, 14th best effective defense last year. As far as not allowing explosive plays, they were the 21st best defense. And as far as being an efficient defense, 18th. Overall, this team was our 17th rated defense in college football last year. All right, now let's get to the coaching aspect of it and really kind of take a look at where this team really excelled and where were some issues that they could have been a little bit better. So when I look at SMU, if I had to bullet point really quickly, going back to their offense, if I had to put a bullet point on their offense, I would say balanced and explosive. If I had to bullet point the defense, I would say tough and opportunistic, as I mentioned, with getting after the opponent's quarterback with 40 sacks. That is absolutely spectacular. All right, Rhett Leslie, your coaching and situational play last year. You were 3-1 in one-score games. You were 7-1 against quality opponents. Now, the penalties and penalties per game, you absolutely got to clean that up. Almost 9 penalties per game for 83 yards of penalties. That does not include the hidden yardage that you lost. So you could easily double that. You're talking about over 150 or 160 yards of just missing yardage, whether it was in favor of your opponent or your offense costing themselves big time with penalties. All right, now let's take a look at something that I really like to do here, and that's really break these teams down. What was your offense like in the games that they won, and what did your offense look like in the games that you lost? So when I take a look at what SMU looked like in the games that they won, you're talking about a team, including the postseason, and that's the college football playoffs and the ACC championship game. This team won 11 games. Their offense was scoring 41 points per game, 275 yards passing on 28 passing attempts. almost 10 yards per pass attempt, 14.4 yards per completion. The run game was also cranking it out, almost 40 runs per game. That's including that dynamic running quarterback for 184 yards per game rushing, 4.6 yards per rushing attempt. Their run pass ratio was extremely geared towards the run, 58% run when they were winning, converting 48% on third downs, and was extremely aggressive going for it on fourth downs. 11 attempts on fourth down, converting almost 46%, committed 16 turnovers, so about 1.5 turnovers per game, but offset by almost a little over 4.5 touchdowns per game. So that kind of touchdown to turnover ratio, you can absolutely live with it when you're talking about 11 games. Now, in the 3 games that they lost, this offense was absolutely stuck in neutral, 18.7 points per game. The passing attempts went up from 28 to 41. Passing yardage per game went down to 214 yards per game, 5.2 yards per attempt, 9.5 yards per completion. The rushing attempts stayed about the same, about 36 attempts per game, but only 110 yards per game rushing, 3.1 yards per rushing attempt. This team was about 50-50 run pass ratio, but the third down conversion took a major dip. Only converted 18.8% on third downs in the games that they lost. Committed 3 turnovers, so this team could not really sustain drives when they were losing. So the difference between when they won and when they lost, you're talking about 23 points per game, 60 more yards per game passing, 74 more yards per game rushing. And then much better conversion rate on third down, almost 29 percentage points better converting on third downs. Now, in the games that they lost, as far as their defense, in those 11 wins, this defense was only allowing 19.3 points per game. Their opponents were attempting 36 pass attempts for 233 yards, 6.4 yards per attempt, 11.4 yards per completion, 34 rushing attempts per game, but only 92 yards per game allowed, 2.7 yards per rushing attempt. Their opponents converting on third downs about 33% of the time, converting on fourth down 43% of the time. Their opponents were going for it on third down at a rapid rate, 35 attempts in those 11 wins for SMU, and their defense forced 18 turnovers. In the 3 games that they lost, we talked about the struggles on offense. Their defense was allowing 30 points per game. Their opponents' pass attempts per game went down to 32. Passing yards per game went down to 200 per game, 6.3 yards per attempt, so no big difference there. Same can be said for the yards per completion, 11.3. The rushing attempts only go up by 2 rushing attempts per game, but the yardage goes up to 129 yards per game rushing, 3.5 yards per rushing attempt. So not a major swing there as far as the rushing and passing yardage. It's just giving up the points. Their opponents were not converting a great rate on third downs, only 15% on third downs, but they were converting almost 67% on fourth down. So opponents converted 2 out of 3 attempts on fourth downs, but this team could not force any turnovers. In those 3 losses, only 3 forced turnovers per game. So That is the biggest difference that I'm noticing right off the bat there with SMU. So if I had to look at, in the final couple of minutes of this podcast, if I had to look at what went wrong for SMU in 2024, the lack of execution in key moments, especially in the games that they lost. Turnover issues in close games, even though they only lost one out of the 4 games that they played, that was 1-score games. In their 3 losses, in their other 2 losses, the point differential was significant. And then we saw some pass defense inconsistencies. So let's go ahead and get to the final grade for SMU. Folks, we're going to give the SMU Mustangs a grade of an A-. Why? Explosive offense, strong pass rush, and elite defensive efficiency. Weaknesses, we talked about it. Penalties, 4th down defense, and pass defense. The final verdict: SMU was one of the most well-rounded teams in the country, but occasional struggles in pass defense and penalties really prevented them from maximizing their full potential last year. So what does this team need to do in 2025? Always like to find 3 bullet points that a team needs to improve on in the upcoming season. Key number 1, they must develop a more balanced offense attack. Want to see that passing game efficiency improved. Kevin Jennings appeared in 14 games, completed 65% of his passes for 3,245 yards, 23 touchdowns. But here's what I didn't like. I didn't like the 11 interceptions. Got to cut down on the INTs, boost up that passing touchdown numbers, because we know he also chipped in with 5 rushing touchdowns last year. So want to see him play with a little bit more consistency going into next year. Key number 2, special teams can't be a liability. Only converting 72% on their field goal attempts. I forgot to give that out earlier, but 23 of 32 on field goal attempts, made all of their extra points, and really struggled with the punting game. Their punter only averaged 40.8 yards per punt. That was 101 in the nation last year. And then key number 3, must limit the turnovers and improve the discipline. We talked about it. Winning the turnover battle is always crucial. And while the Mustangs forced 21 turnovers, they did commit 19 of them. So only a +2 turnover differential there, and over 8 penalties per game. If SMU focus on these key areas, this team could absolutely make it back to the college football playoffs.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy